Hello, first grade. It's Miss Van Wert again. Today's story is called The Inca, the Runner. Our learning objectives for today are to discuss the importance of Incan roads, describe the role of Inca runners, demonstrate an understanding of the word forbidden, use a text and images to describe Incan farming, explain the importance of farming to the Inca, write a summary statement about the Inca farming. Our key vocabulary are forbidden, gasping, and honor. Forbidden is an adjective and it means not allowed. Unless you are royalty, you are forbidden from entering the palace. Gasping is a verb, and gasping means panting or struggling to breathe. After running a mile, the boy was gasping for breath. Honor is a noun, and honor is a sign of distinction or respect. It was a great honor to be picked line leader of the class. Okay, so who can show me where did the Maya live? Where did the Maya live? In North America on the Yucatan Peninsula. Okay. What about the Aztecs? Where did the Aztec live? Over here in central Mexico, close to what we now know as Mexico City. How about the Inca? They lived in South America along the Andes Mountains, right? So from like here to like here, okay? In the last read aloud, we learned that the Inca built 20,000 miles of roads. Today's story is called The Runner. Why do you think it's called this? Do you think a runner might have to do with Inca roads? Let's see. Remember, our key vocabulary are forbidden, gasping, and honor. Listen carefully to find out what the runner's job is. He waited by the side of the road, glancing back every minute or so. He had already warmed up his muscles, stretching and bending, preparing for what he was about to do. Now he was ready. While he waited, he thought about a few years ago when he had first become a runner for the Inca. You are the fastest runner in our village, the old man had told him on that day 5 years before. Everyone in our village farms. We pay the emperor by giving him part of our crop each season. So the Inca were required to pay the emperor for the right to live on his land. This is how we pay for soldiers to protect us and for priests to pray for us. But no matter how much we give, always the answer comes back to us. More, you must give more. But you, boy, can change all that. If you become a runner, our people will not have to give as much of our crop to the emperor. If we do not have to give as much of our crop to the emperor, it will mean more food for hungry mouths. It will bring honor upon you, your family, and your tribe. If someone honors you, that means they look up to you and they respect you for what you've done. Looking into the old man's eyes, he knew that he had no choice. Why do you think the boy had no choice in deciding whether or not he could be a runner? Well, if he became a runner, he could help his village, okay? His job would serve as payment to the emperor so that his people wouldn't have to pay as much and they could keep more of their crops, right? Soon after the old man told him this, the royal servants came to the village high up on a steep mountainside. They had heard how fast the boy could run, and they were there to see if he really was such a fast, long-distance runner. The servants sent one man some distance down the mountain road and then had the young runner sprint to the man as fast as he could. He raced along, loving the free feeling of running. The wind was blowing his hair, and his feet seemed to move as fast as if they had minds of their own. He had run fast that day to show that he could, and that same day the servants took him from his village and his family, the only people and the only home he had ever known. That sounds kind of sad. Now you have the honor of being a runner, he was told. The emperor has commanded many roads to be built so that he can send orders and messages all over his mighty empire and receive back news from even the most distant corners of his nation. So the Inca, they didn't have a written language. So these spoken or oral messages were an important way of communicating. They didn't write letters, okay? You will carry news, orders for the soldiers and governors who will serve our emperor, and occasionally even small objects. Another runner will appear at a specific time and at a specific place to bring these things to you. Then you will carry them for many miles and hand them in turn to the next runner like a relay race. It is a great honor to serve the emperor in this way, and you will be cared for accordingly. You shall always be well fed. There will always be warm, comfortable places for you to rest or sleep at the end of your time running. And look, this bracelet of gold and copper is for you to wear. Do you see his bracelet that's on his arm? Since that time, the runner had carried news many times. Sometimes the runner before him handed off a leather bag with straps he could throw over his shoulders so that it would not get in the way of his even stride. He himself never knew what the bag contained. He was forbidden to look. The word forbidden means you are not allowed to do something. Why do you think that the runner was forbidden to look in the bag? I don't know. His job was simply to carry it onward. Now, as he waited, he wondered what he was to carry this time. Was it news for him to memorize and pass on to the next runner? Would there be a bag this time? How far was he to run before he would see the next runner waiting for him by the road as he himself waited? Then he looked once more along the road and saw another runner coming. But what was this? The man was having trouble standing upright. He was gasping for breath. Sometimes we say we have to catch our breath because when we've been breathing so hard, or because we had been breathing so hard, when this happens, we gasp for breath. It was obvious he had run faster than he had ever run before. What is it? The runner said. The other man answered, Strangers in metal. They're riding on. I cannot tell you. I do not know what to call them. Who do you think the strangers in metal were? So, how do the strangers get from one place to another? On horses, okay? None of this made sense to the runner, but before he could speak, the man told him, There is no time. Take this. He shrugged himself out of the straps and handed him the pouch. Run, as you have never run before. There are enemies among us. The other man gasped, Run, run, my brother. So the runner swung the straps over his own shoulders, but before he left, he helped the other man sit down with his back to the trunk of a shady tree to rest. Here is water, he said, giving the other messenger his own supply. I will take news. I promise you the emperor will receive this message. Then, as he turned and sprang forward with all his might, he heard the other man repeat again in deep, gasping breaths, Run! Run, my brother! After that, all he heard was the sound of his own footsteps as he settled into his running pace and turned the bend of the road, knowing he had a long way to go. All right, why do you think this read aloud was called The Runner? Because it's about a young man whose job is running messages and packages around the Incan Empire. Okay? Were you right when you guessed what this story was going to be about? All right, it is comprehension question and word work time. So if you need a wiggle break, go ahead and do that and then come right back. Okay, why was the boy called a runner? What was his job? He carried news, messages, and sometimes small objects from one place to another over long distances, and he was running. How did the Inca communicate between faraway villages? They used those runners, right? And who did the runners work for? The emperor of the Inca. Why was the boy chosen to be the emperor's runner? He was the fastest runner in the village, and the emperor had been told about his speed, right? So the read aloud tells us that it was an honor or something very special to be chosen as a runner. Why was it considered an honor? Because the runner was helping his whole village, right? His job served as partial payment to the emperor so that his people could have more of the crops that they farmed to feed their hungry villagers, right? Is the runner the only runner in the empire? No. How do we know that there were other runners? Because the read aloud tells us that the runner hands off messages to other runners, like relay race runners working as a team. Why would the emperor need so many runners? Think about how big his empire was. Exactly, because his empire was huge, right? They had over 20,000 miles worth of roads. How do you know that the new runner has never before seen a horse? Because he says that the men in metal are riding on something, but he doesn't even know what to call them, right? Okay, in the read aloud, you heard the runner was forbidden to look inside the bag that he carried for the emperor. Say the word forbidden. Forbidden. Can you say it in a robot voice? Forbidden. Okay. If you are forbidden to do something, that means you are not allowed to do it. We are forbidden to drive through a red light because someone might get hurt. Tell about something that you are forbidden to do. Try to use the word forbidden when you tell about it. What's the word we've been talking about? Forbidden. Okay. So, what did the people in the read aloud give to the Inca emperor in payment for living on his land? Crops, right? People who grow crops for a living are called what? Farmers. What kind of tools might farmers use to harvest their crops? They may use a whole bunch of different things, okay? So this is a picture of an ancient or very old farming tool used used by the Inca at the time that the runner lived. And this is still a tool that is being used today, hundreds of years later. Do you know what this tool might be used for? What kind of crops do you think it might be used for? Think about what kind of crops the Maya and the Aztec grew. The Inca also grew some of the same crops, but the Inca who lived in the Andes Mountains, where the runners of today's stories lived, were also probably the first people in the world to farm potatoes. Do you know where potatoes grow? In the ground, okay? What would you use to dig up potatoes from under the ground? A shovel, a hoe, a plow. So, the takie is a foot plow or a digging stick. It is still better for digging up potatoes on steep mountains and slopes other than modern tools because it is able to break up hard dirt. Okay, so the farming was a family activity to the Inca, and the takie was designed to be used by a team of workers. The men would turn over the earth in long strips while the women and children crouched on either side of the row to get the dirt out of the way in order to plant the seeds or the potatoes. I want you to imagine that you're living in the runner's village and that you are farmers there. Okay? What would it look like if you guys were farming with the Takie? Okay? And sorry, I lost my place. Where would this picture go? Would it go under farming, cities, leaders, or religion? It would go under farming, right? Oh, I have a question for you really quick before we check if we did our learning objectives. Do you think you would be a good runner? Do you think you'd be a good runner? Remember, you would have to be fast, you'd have to be away from your family, and you'd have to be able to remember those messages for very long runs, and you couldn't look in the bags. What do you think? I think I'd be a good runner if I was allowed to look in the bags. I just don't think that I would be able to not look in the bag. All right, so today we discussed the importance of Incan roads. We described the role of Inca runners. We demonstrated an understanding of the word forbidden. We used a text and image to describe Incan farming. We were able to explain the importance of farming to the Inca. That was their currency, their form of currency, which means how they paid the emperor. And here in a moment, you are going to write a summary about Inca farming. All right, guys, awesome job. See you next time.